Hello and welcome here from Germany. My name is Martin Krolop. I'm a professional photographer based here in Cologne, which is in Germany. So this video today will be about a very special lens. It's a very long expected lens. It's the Tamron 70 to 180 millimeter lens. It has a aperture of 2.8 from bottom to top, and it's a specially designed E-mount lens for Sony E-mount cameras. So let's get started right away. Before we start with the review, we have to talk about one very important thing. It's about our hashtag transparency. This is super important for reviews and technical testing. And in this case, it's super important as well because this lens, there it is, the 70 to 180 millimeter lens from Tamron, you can't buy it at the moment. If you go into a store and you say, I want to buy it, they tell you, sorry, we can't sell it because we don't have it. So how can it be that we have it and we are testing it? Obviously, first of all, Tamron gave it to us for 14 days. After those 14 days, it's going to be back in Japan. Then, second of all, it's a pre-production sample. And third of all, we have no money involved with this deal, but they're probably hoping for a good review. But we, in this case, we just want to make an honest review. This is why we are going to be kind of proving and arguing and trying to show reality by showing pictures. So after this, try to stay cautious. I want to explain everything, and I think you'll be understanding everything I say. We have been doing a production on the Canary Islands, and unfortunately, because of the actual corona crisis going on all over the world right now, we had to quit the production and go back to Germany a lot of days earlier than actually planned. But during that moment of coming back to Germany, we did collect an awful lot of experience with the lens. And this video, the whole review here, will be kind of a mixture of the two worlds, the real world experience and then the kind of laboratory testing we're doing in our studio, just one level, one floor above this YouTube studio. So always keep in mind, there are two worlds, a lens in a kind of test laboratory and then in the real world. Me as a photographer, I always think that the real world is more important than the laboratory. But sometimes it's cool to look at both worlds. I don't want to spoil the video, but I can tell you, and I can tell that from the experience we have collected during different photo shootings on the Canary Islands, harsh light, shadow light, whatever. I can already tell you, waiting for that lens was worth it. So let's look at the lens. First of all, the lens itself is kind of completely different than the actual competitor. But let's put the competitors aside and look at the Tamron idea. So this is not a 70 to 200, it's a 70 to 180. It's 20 mil difference in the focal length, but the whole lens is super, super different. It is kind of a different concept, which is Tamron. It's a Tamron concept. Let me explain. Tamron started this kind of completely new concept when first coming out with a 28 to 75 millimeter lens. And they continued doing it with a 17 to 28. And now with the 70 to 180, they're just going further and further with it. And it's a very, very interesting concept because especially when using a Sony E-mount camera, like a mirrorless camera. Mirrorless cameras always come with like small size and compactness, and everyone is telling you, oh, let's get rid of the big DSLR cameras and stick with mirrorless cameras because they're super small. But then you look at a 70 to 200 millimeter lens f4 2.8 and it's kind of nothing smaller than a regular 70 to 200 millimeter lens. So the whole thing with the compactness and the size and, well, yeah, it could be, and Tamron is doing it, but most of the lenses they're not following it. Especially Sigma is producing bigger and bigger and bigger lenses, and sometimes I think that, is this really the aim? But let's get back to the Tamron concept. What are they doing? They're kind of, it's not magic. It's kind of genius somehow, but it's not magic. They're just leaving away something and making it kind of smaller or better. by leaving away anything. Let me explain. So you have a 200mm lens and you leave away 20mm of the focal length. So going back to 180. This is a reduction of 10% in focal length. But you're not reducing the weight and the size by also 10%. You're reducing the weight and the size by even more. This is the same with the aperture. You know, like Sigma is producing an f1.4 lens and Tamron is producing an f1.8 lens. And the f1.8 is kind of a lot smaller and less weighty than the f1.4. It's not a linear kind of balancing, it's an exponential thing. And this is kind of, like I said, it's not magic, it's logical. And especially with this lens, you have a super different aim than the main competitor, the 70 to 200mm f2.8. Tamron is not trying to duplicate a already given lens. They're thinking it new. They're kind of doing it in a different way, leaving away some millimeters, trying to be as compact, as reasonable priced, as sharp as possible still. And this is what makes the idea so perfect. And I think as a photographer, it's the small little things which make the idea so great. Another example, it's the diameter of the filter. The new lens here the diameter is 67mm. And when you look at the other lenses of the Tamron Trinity, E-mount Trinity, the 70-28 and the 28-75, they do have the same diameter. So 67mm diameter. In the real world, as a photographer, you don't need to buy step down, step up rings for your filters. And you don't even need to buy a second set of filters or a third set of filters. You can just work with one set of filters. And this again is reducing the weight of your backpack, and it makes everything so much cheaper and so much more comfortable to use it. Because, well, it has happened a lot of times during my 14 years of photography that I missed like the wrong filter, and sometimes you have a filter which is in the wrong case, and it's just like really troubleful to cope with those little things. You might think when watching the video, this is kind of, it's not professional, but sometimes these things happen, and it's just so clever to use one filter diameter. And in this case, you have, I guess, 77 or 72. Well, let's have a look. It's 77. So the filter on the 70-200 f2.8 Sony G Master is 77, and it's only 10mm. But when buying a filter, a good filter like Schneider Kreuznach or any other super filter, ND filter, variable ND filter, and 10mm different, make a lot of money. So just try and find out. So the Tamron concept is leaving away and focusing on really important things. And this is what I think is super nice for especially Sony E-mount photographers, because they have such a small and compact camera. They shouldn't use lenses like this. They can. I do. I bought this lens. I did use this lens a lot of times, but does it have to be? Let's look at the competitors for this test, because we actually, there are lenses. We bought the 70-200mm 2.8 G Master, and we also own the 70-200mm f4 Master G, not the G Master, but the G Sony lens. So both of them we do own, and this would be like the third lens in this focal length area. So those are the two main competitors of the Tamron lens. And I can only look at the German prices right now. Here in Germany, the Sony f4 costs 1,100 euro. The Sony G Master f2.8 is 2,700 euros. And the Tamron, it's not officially announced, but we have been, it's very unofficial statement, it's around 1,200. It could be 30, I don't know. I'm not even sure if I can name it or if I am allowed to say it in this video, but it's around 1,200 euros. So it's a really big difference. If you look at the three lenses, it's kind of, the G Master is way above everything else. And then you have two very similar priced lenses, but one is f4 and the other one is 2.8. And this is a huge difference. And when you look at the lens itself, you'll see that the Tamron lens is even smaller than the f4 lens. The Tamron lens itself is kind of as small as the 24 to 70 G Master lens. Let's look at this. Look at the Tamron lens, and then we put aside of the Tamron lens the G Master lens. And you'll see it's a very small difference. And the one lens is a 24/7 T and the other one is a 70 to 180 telephoto lens. Wow, what a difference. Let's look at some other facts. There is the weight. So in weight, there is exactly the same difference as in size. The Sony f4 and the Tamron f2.8, they are around the same weight with 815 and 840 gram. The Sony G Master is 1.5 kilo. That's a huge difference, and well, you'll probably notice when shooting and working with it a lot. Then we can look at the color difference. As you can see here, the G Master and the G without the Master, the f4, is the same. They're white. The white color is a super big difference. And well, I really love the color because it shows that in photography, nothing is like white and black and white. It's always like gray, because the color, this can be a pro and a con. It can be an advantage, but it also can be a disadvantage. If you go around with this lens and you want to stick under the radar, how you call it, like kind of photograph something without being detected and without being asked stupid questions, what are you doing? And well, this is not going to work with this lens. The white, it looks super professional. Everyone is coming to you and what are you doing here? And you have a permission? And well, it can be really a pain in the ass. Sorry for saying that. This lens looks more like, it doesn't even look like a telephoto lens. It's still big, but it's not as visibly professional from the color. But on the other hand, the white just looks professional. So this can be an advantage because you want to show up at a wedding and no one is asking you if you are the cool professional photographer. This can also be like going into both directions, you see? And it is a huge difference. Let's stick with one thing, and this is the zooming inside or the extending zoom. So let's look at this. I'm removing the lens hood. If you zoom this lens, nothing is changing. So put it here. Nothing is changing. So it's zooming inside. With this lens, this is extending. And this is a huge difference because, well, the video guys, they will probably prefer this lens because of gimbal working and stuff like that, and because of weight balancing. But still, it's a different style of constructing a lens. Another very important difference is that with the Tamron lens, the zoom lens is at the top, at the front of the lens, while the focus ring is at the back. And with the original G Master or G lens, the zoom is at the back and the focus is at the front. So it's just a construction difference, but it is a difference. Well, what is the first and kind of the most obvious difference of the two lenses, or all of the three lenses? The Sony G Master and the G lens, they do have both an optical steady shot. So the OSS, this is the stabilization system within the lens of the system. The Tamron does not have vibration control or vibration compensation, which how it is called with the Tamron lenses. It's not stabilized. Again, you see, no? As I told you with the Tamron concept, they leave away things and like putting the money into different aspects. In this case, they don't have a stabilization within the lens, and so they do have kind of money to spend on other things, or they can reduce the price of the lens. It's very interesting. I thought a lot about the missing stabilization system. We did the photo shootings on the Canary Islands mainly with the 7R Mark IV. And the 7R Mark IV is sensor stabilized. And actually I didn't miss at any point the stabilization of the lens. I didn't even notice that the lens was not stabilized. Even though we swapped lenses all the time, so I swapped like from this lens to this lens and this back, because we wanted to find out which is better and which is more comfortable and what is pro and con. So even with changing every 10 seconds, I did not notice having a stabilization system or not. But I can tell you from a technical aspect that the stabilization within the camera, so the sensor stabilization, is more valuable for wide-angle lenses. But with telephoto lenses, you have a kind of prioritizing the stabilization system within the lens. So it gives you like one f-stop more stabilization, having a stabilization system within the lens. And with the Sony cameras, they can use both. So they can use the sensor stabilization and the stabilization within the lens. Another huge difference is the missing stand clamp. So I don't know if it's the correct wording. This here, where you put the lens on the tripod because it's too heavy. If you use this lens and you connect it to a camera which is connected to tripod, the weight and the force is pulling everything down, and this could actually break the bayonet of the camera. So this here, the stand clamp, you won't find it with the Tamron lens. This is because the Tamron lens is so super lightweighted, and it's just like a 24-70. It's the same weight as a 24-70, and you can just attach it to your camera. I really love that fact. It's super handy. Sometimes I'm really annoyed by putting it there and then back to the camera, and when you use another lens, then you have to put everything back, or sometimes you're missing the spares from the tripod. So it's just super comfortable to not have it. But again, it's money, and it looks super professional to have it. Another thing where both G and G Master lenses do surpass the Tamron lens is the function buttons. So the customizable function buttons. Both Sony lenses do have 3 of those very special lenses at the buttons at the lens. And then they do have the complete control of the optical steady shot and which mode you want to use it, and then AF, MF. You won't find this with the Tamron lens. So the Tamron lens doesn't have any button except the lock button to lock it or to keep it from not going forth and back when you're just kind of walking around with it, and I don't know. So the only button you find on the Tamron lens is the lock button. Oops, I'm sorry. Spitting on it. Sorry. Say it, don't spray it. How is the touch and feel? Actually, this is again a Tamron problem, but I hope that you understand what I'm trying to tell you. This is 1.5 kilo of kind of pure metal and glass. It's super heavy and it feels very valuable. This is 800 gram. It's super lightweighted. It's not the same cold metal as the Sony lens, and it does not feel as valuable. But that's kind of a feeling. It's not, how can I explain it better? If you have a feather, the feather doesn't feel very valuable because it's kind of super lightweighted. It doesn't give you an impression of like steel, of the hardness of steel. But in reality, a feather is super, super highly constructed because otherwise it wouldn't be so light. So it's kind of the mixture in your head. When you pick up the Tamron lens, you don't have that weight feeling in your hand, and probably your head is going to give you like, oh, this is not as valuable as the heavy lens. Probably if they make this 2.5 kilos, it would feel more valuable. The Tamron lens doesn't have any, so it's not, I don't see any point where it is not really high valuable. It is sealed, it has a rubber sealing at the bayonet. This is not, it's kind of a very light-weighted lens, point. The other ones are kind of heavier. Interesting, if you compare this lens to the 24-70 f4, the f4 doesn't give you the same valuable feeling as the 2.8 as well. So because it's kind of the same weight. If you look at the texture of the coating of the surface of the lenses, you'll see a very metallic, very rough white coating of the Sony lenses, while the Tamron lens is more sleeky and more polished and more a not as rough surface as the Sony lenses. I guess it's kind of a question of taste, personal taste. One other thing is the MOD. The MOD is 1 meter with the f4 lens, 96 centimeters with the f2.8 Sony lens, and 85 millimeter with the Tamron lens. But keep in mind, it's a 180 millimeter lens, and the other one's a 200 millimeter lens. So the Sony G Master and the Tamron, they have kind of the same ratio. Is it ratio? It is ratio. So this is kind of the same, although it's shorter, but the focal length is not the same. So it's kind of relatively the same. One very important thing we have to look at is the new autofocus system with the Tamron lens. It's called RXD engine or motor for the autofocus. It's a newly developed, state-of-the-art, better than ever thing. If you read the leaflets, actually it's super fast. We shot a lot with the two lenses, and you can clearly see a difference when using the lens, and then afterwards straight away the G Master lens. The Tamron lens is faster when coming from close to the point of focus in the distance, and the speed itself is super fast, and it is visibly faster than the G Master lens. So again, if you want to have an explanation, and if you want to think that this can't be, it's also related to the size and the weight. The less weight the lens has, the less power the motor has to have to move the lenses or to shift the glass. And most of the time, the less weight a lens has, the quicker it can be and the faster it can be from moving the lenses forth and back and forth and back. So this is kind of a partially explanation. There's more to it, but it can be definitely. The weight difference is so massive that it takes a lot to move kind of half a kilo more in the same speed as this lens. Finally, we've reached the optical quality topic. Optical quality, which is kind of the mother of all tests of a lens, is super important. What's within optical quality? Let's make this clear. First of all, it's sharpness, contrast, and color. So sharpness, contrast, color, this all comes together with one. Then it's chromatic aberrations. This is, it's a very annoying error when shooting pictures. And then it's vignetting, so having very dark corners. And then it's distortion. But we leave out the distortion. Those lenses are super, super superb, and distortion isn't that problematic with telephoto lenses. So it's more important when having wide angle lenses, ultra wide angle lenses. In this case, they're super cool. Point. So we have to look at sharpness, contrast, color, chromatic aberration, and vignetting. So let's get started. Sharpness, we will look at two different focal lengths. So we're using the lower end, 70 mm, and then we are looking at the higher end of the focal length. In the Tamron case, it's 180, and in the Sony cases, it's 200 mil. So we're comparing 180 millimeter against 200 millimeters by changing the distance of the camera towards the actual object. We want to do this, or we're doing this because we want to actually compare sharpness and color and correction without having to enlarge or reduce the size of an object. So 1 by 1 pixel is the thing we look at. Okay, and then another important fact, we are doing this test on a 7R Mark IV. This is a 60 megapixel camera and we're not using any other camera. So no 7R Mark III or no 7 III. 42 or 24 megapixels wouldn't be the same as 60 megapixels. We come to that and the reason why in a few seconds. But keep in mind it's 60 megapixels and it's a lot of testing. So let's get started. This is the center, 70 mil, and it's the open aperture f2.8. With the Sony G without master, it's clearly an f4 and double the ISO. Okay, what we can see here is that, okay, you can clearly see that the G f4 is not as sharp as the Sony or the Tamron, the Sony G master and the Tamron. At what area can we look at? Actually, it's quite the same. If you go and look for some details on the barcode, actually, I couldn't tell you which is sharper or which is. This is kind of the same. So Tamron 2.8, Sony G master 2.8, 70 mil center, same. Let's look at a closed aperture of 5.6. I'd say the Tamron is a bit brighter, so the transmission is a bit better with the Tamron, but I can't really tell any difference. I would still say definitely the f4 Sony lens is out because it's clearly and visibly not as sharp, and I would say that with the G master you get a bit of more blacks, but also they're kind of in the barcode. Within the barcode you can see a bit of redness, or they're kind of colored. More contrast, but colored. I'd say I couldn't say which is better. So both. Again, we can stop at this moment here. This is the actual framing, and then we have the lens. We're looking at the most outer area of the actual picture. So as you can see here, the two places we compare within the test is the dead center and then the most outer point of the whole picture. So the most difficult place to look at. Okay, the Sony f4 out, clearly and visibly not as sharp at all. Okay, but I'd say the Tamron is absolutely winning this comparison. When you look at the barcode, it gives you way more detail. If you look at the writing on the right side of the green patch, it gives you way more detail. It's a bit less colorful. That's very interesting. It's a bit less colorful, but it's sharper. Very interesting. Okay, so Tamron is winning the corner 2.8, corner 5.6. Again, you have this reddish or kind of red-like look within the blacks from the G master. So again, the G, the f4 out, clearly visibly not as sharp. But when you look at the G master and the Tamron, the G master has a bit more red within the black. So the Tamron is clearer. Was more clear? It's kind of more clean, I guess. Okay, let's look at the center 2.8 at 200 mil, respectively 180 mil. Again, I think the writing has a bit of red. The whole blacks are clearer, are more black-like with the Tamron. Yes. Okay. The center, f5.6. Here the Sony G Master, I think, is better. A bit darker again. Like the transmission again, f5.6 is better with the Tamron. So it's kind of a third, or I would say a 10th of an f/stop, just a slightly bit. But this, I would say, the G Master. Corners, wow, this is a huge difference. Okay, I would say third position, the f4, second, the G Master, first place, Tamron. This is a super huge difference. Look above Kodak. If you look at the writing above Kodak, you can see some blurriness within the G Master lens, but on the Tamron side, it's kind of pure sharpness. This is super amazing. And this is again the corner, yeah? The most outer corner of the picture in the frame. f5.6, again, Tamron is a bit brighter. Again, it's a bit more red within both Sony lenses. But the big difference, the huge difference is gone. I just say it's the same. No winner in between G Master and Tamron lens. I guess a lot of photographers will look at this video and say, okay, this is a huge difference between the f4 and the G Master, and I've never experienced something like that. This is probably due to the resolution of the camera. The resolution of a camera is quite important for the actual outcome of a test. You can compare it with kind of enlarging everything. Also the errors and flaws of a lens. So when having a 7 Mark III and 24 megapixels and then using a 7R Mark IV with 60 megapixels, you're kind of inflating and enlarging everything by a near factor of 3. So some things you probably have been seeing or have not been seeing with a 7 Mark III, you probably notice when using a 7R Mark IV. So don't, like, I was really astonished because I bought the f4 lens, I bought the G Master lens, and we bought the 7R Mark IV just a few weeks ago. And until now, I did not realize how big the difference between the f4 and the G Master was. But now I can see it, and I can only see it with the 60 megapixels of the 7R Mark IV. We did some testing again, and this is especially for all the viewers who go like, oh, this can't be. Look at this comparison. It's the Tamron and the G Master lens, and it's been shot on a 7 Mark III with 24 megapixels. It's kind of super interesting. The longer you look at it, you can't see anything. It's not a different. Well, the longer you look, the less you see. You can practically don't tell which is sharper and which is not. When you look at the difference between a 60 megapixel and a 24 megapixel camera, this is the difference. You're kind of enlarging everything. The same film box from Kodak is now nearly 3 times the size within the same picture when you look at the picture 1 pixel by 1 pixel. Not 1 by 1, but like 100%. And probably you notice when looking at this comparison that the whole picture looks sharper on the right side than on the left side. And now I can tell you the left side is a 60 megapixel picture, and this, the 24 megapixels, we've reduced digitally afterwards. So in Photoshop, we reduced this resolution down to 24, and what you see here is kind of a feeling of more sharpness, but it's not. It's just smaller, and it appears sharper to you. When we look at the 60 megapixel comparison, we see everything is blown up, everything is enlarged, but now we can see the difference. And this is due to the high resolution. So the point is, if you have not recognized such a difference with your lens, you have to ask yourself, are you using the same testing situation? Is it the same testing with a 60 megapixel camera, for instance? Or is it kind of a reduced resolution and therefore a reduced requirement for the optical quality? This is a very, very, very important message, because if you have a Alpha 7 Mark III and you're looking for a lens and you're looking at this video here and I go like, oh, the f4 is not good, then for you it could be a perfect lens, because you will probably not see any difference when not using 60 megapixels. So you always have to take into consideration that having something which, when you take pictures, is not being seen at all and is not noticeable at all, it's not useful. So keep this in mind. It's a kind of theoretical evaluation. If I used a 100 megapixel camera, differences would be even more, but it doesn't make one lens less useful for another camera. So this is kind of really messing up your or my mind totally. Okay, let's come to chromatic aberrations. Chromatic aberrations, this is a fork, and we used a strobe from the back, and practically none of the three lenses is producing any chromatic aberrations. It's super, super crazy. I have not seen a lot of lenses which have so low and so little chromatic aberrations like those three lenses. So again, Tamron did an amazing job with the chromatic aberrations, and I even did some test shots of some funny palms on the Canarian Islands, and I was not able to get any chromatic aberrations at all. Kind of like, it was really it was really funny. We were looking for them, physically looking for them and trying to get them, but we did not. Next point, vignetting. Vignetting is something which is actually only visible at open aperture. So if you're using an f8 or an f11, you probably don't know what vignetting is. I only want to look at the G Master and the Tamron lens, because the G lens is not as superb from the optical quality as those two lenses, and I think it's super confusing if you look at too many pictures. So let's have a look at the two lenses. On the left, you can see the G Master, on the right, the Tamron, and you can visibly see vignettation. So when using both lenses on f2.8, you will have to cope with vignettation. It's not a super strong vignettation, and it's nothing like using an f1.4 and f1.8, like a super fast portraiture lens, but there is vignettation. It's going away very quickly when going down to f4. I would say at f5 or even at 4.5, this is it, and nothing is changing from there on. Transmission would be the next point. Transmission is something which is super important for me, because there is an f-stop and there's a t-stop. The f-stop is the actual kind of physically aperture opening, while the t-stop is the actual amount of light being going through the lens. So sometimes you have an f1.4 lens, but the light is only T1.6 or 1.5. It's super important, and we shot the same situation, strobe light, 100% correct strobe light, and we looked at the histogram of the resulting pictures, and you can clearly see that with all three lenses, the Tamron is the best. Second is the G Master, and the white would be the f4. So it's only a small difference, but I guess it's like a fifth of an f-stop, kind of around that. But you can see it. It's just plain brighter than the other two lenses. You probably wondered why we have so funny blue lights in here, and I can switch them on in case I want to do something very personally and subjective. Is subjective the right word? I don't know. So like every time we speak here with us on this YouTube channel about personal opinions, this is kind of a warning in between objective and personal opinions. Flaring and ghosting is something, yeah, I can talk about it, but actually, I guess 5 photographers, 10 opinions. Let's look at all 3 lenses: f2.8, Tamron, and the G only lens. Okay, again, it's super, super, super personal. Just look at it. I'm not telling you anything at all. Round bubbles. A bit citrus-like with the Tamron and the Sony, especially on the outside, and a bit edgy with the f4 lens. But, well, I'm really sorry for that. I'm not a huge fan of talking about super nice bokeh, because I think you can't really, for me, it's not mathematically, it's just too subjective, too personally. You have to decide for yourself. Stars, next very important thing. Stars. Voila. They all produce very fancy and nice stars when going down to f11 or f16. Yeah. By the way, you should not do this with 60 megapixel camera because of refraction. Never go to f16. Don't do it. Okay, so let's come back to our experience on the Canarian Islands. We did a lot of shooting, and there are some things we noticed which are kind of super interesting for a review like this. A very interesting difference between especially those 2 lenses were that with the G Master lens, I had to empty the whole middle of my backpack to put lens and camera, and sometimes even the lens, the hood, into the backpack. With the Tamron lens, I could use the side, and I could use like a double area of the normal rucksack, and I didn't use so much space. And this was really, really nice and handy, because it takes a third of your whole rucksack, of your whole backpack, and everything is gone. Something I was a bit afraid of, especially with the externally extending zooming, was the case that we were shooting a lot with wind and moisture and sand, and those areas are kind of the weak spots of a lens when coping with sand and little particles. But actually, we shot like right into the desert with having a lot of very bad and very strong wind, and nothing happened. There's perfect. It was sealed amazingly. Another thing we experienced is that I did not really like the f4 anymore. I know I bought it, I will sell it. This is one experience I made. I don't like it anymore. It's kind of not as cool as the both lenses. The look of the pictures, I don't like them because of the f4. And well, I think it's not coping with the Tamron. Then something which was super amazing was that I really loved working with the whole Trinity of the Tamron lenses. Actually, it's super compact, and my backpack again was too big. For the kind of first time in 14 years, the backpack was too big and the gear was too small. Those 3 lenses, they're kind of super amazingly great, and I loved switching in between. Sometimes we shot one shot with 180mm lens, and then we swapped to 17mm, and it was great. Okay, sorry, we have one more topic. It's a video topic. I know you guys are going to be asking about the video. The focus is very, 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 very unnoisy, so it's very little noise. You can practically hear nothing of the new VXD engine, and the autofocus is super quick and working perfectly. One thing, and this is the professional video filmer speaking within me, I don't like that the focus ring is so small, because when doing video, we're doing a lot of manual focusing, and sometimes it's just nicer to have a bigger ring. But yeah, again, we all want to have smaller lenses, but like the buttons and the rings, they should be bigger. Like, it doesn't work out like this. It is like this. On a video aspect, professional video aspect, sometimes it would be nicer to have a bigger focus ring. Okay, final conclusion. The lens, the Tamron lens, and this video is about the Tamron lens, not about the G Master and not about the G, is less money, way less money and less value. But the question is it really worth, or is it even important? What Tamron did is kind of, as I said, not magic, but logical. They're leaving away the optical steady shot, the image stabilization system. They're leaving away 20 millimeter of focal length. They are leaving away within the internal zooming. They're making it extending. They're leaving away all bottoms. They're reducing on several points, but they're not reducing on optical quality. And they're not reducing on very important facts, on size, on price, on compactness, or on weight. So it's kind of a classical construction topic. What is your focus? If you can't live with not having the buttons, if you want to have a AF button to switch it off here, if you need that, and if you need a button on your lens, then you just have to pay for it. It's going to cost more because it's pricier to produce, to actually develop. It's pricier. If you don't need it, then you can buy from now on a superb lens with real basic functionality. And this is what the Tamron lens is all about. It's even faster from the autofocus. It's even sharper on the edges as the G Master lens, which is like 2 times the price of the Tamron. Just think about it. Twice the price, and it's not even sharper. But it has a stabilization, blah, blah, blah. All the things I really mentioned already, you won't find in the Tamron lens. So for you guys, and by the way, girls as well, fellow colleagues and photographers, it's just a question of what you really need and what you want to have. The Tamron is, I don't know if this is a correct saying, the best bang for the buck. We don't have this in German, so I hope it's the correct wording. The best bang for the buck. Again, after the 28 to 75 and the 17 to 28. You're not getting everything there is, but you're getting the smallest and sharpest and fastest lens for E-mount there is. That's amazing. I hope you enjoyed this review. If you have any questions, feel free to comment. I will gladly answer. Right now, at the moment, at the current situation all over the world, I guess we all have some things to do to not look at the comments every second, but from now and then we log on and we have a look at the comments. And if you guys say we have to do anything better, differently, then feel free to post this as well. We're always trying to be as reasonable and as perfect as possible. And I guess this is the reason why this review is not only about 10 minutes. I'm sorry if this was a super long review, but I think it's a super important lens. And a lot of Sony E-mount photographers will happily look for a reasonable priced 70 to 180 telephoto lens. So have good luck, stay healthy, super important, and hopefully soon on this channel. Thank you for watching.